Hello, my fellow strangers. I hope you're all doing well, and I'm going to start by asking, did YouTube kill the Hollywood star? Now, to answer my own question before I even get into the meat of the question, I don't think that YouTube has killed the Hollywood star, so to speak, but I do think it's done quite a lot to disrupt the system that has long been used to create and uphold stardom. As a media scholar, I tend to ponder a lot of questions related to the way in which media progresses and how it disrupts or falls in line with current systems. I often have questions regarding social media stardom and the connection that it has to the old Hollywood star system. First, there were theater stars and film stars and radio stars and television stars, and now they're social media stars. So clearly, every media system that we have tends to have some sort of star creating and sustaining system that is attached to it. So too have new medias such as social media, and YouTube is part of that. I think it was sort of inevitable in some ways that this new media stardom that's been sort of circulating for the past decade or so, and the system that's sort of been in place or been created to sort of sustain that, would inevitably have some repercussions or some effect on the systems of stardom that came before it. Several of the traditional media star systems that existed before hinged upon or relied upon in some major way on these gatekeepers who played a major role in finding and in some ways creating stars. In other words, fame, as far as it's sort of connected to these traditional medias, like television and film and maybe radio back in the day, were heavily reliant on some person within this system above people who are aspiring to be stars or aspiring stars. It would rely on them to act sort of as gatekeepers, who would have to sort of champion someone. That person or champion would have to introduce an upcoming star to the right people and try and get them in a new film or in a new production of some sort. And then after that thing that they are in, the production they're in is made, people would have to then hope that, there would be some sort of audience or public support for that person, and then maybe you would hope then to get into another production, and then the vehicle of stardom sort of becomes in some ways symbiotic. Somebody would be in another film, and thereby them being in the film would then give credence to that film, and that film would thereby hopefully maybe give more attention to that person's career. But before you get to the point where it becomes that symbiotic system, someone has to hope that someone sees something in them and takes a chance on them in a project or whatever. However, the advent of social media has sort of leveled the playing field in some respects. It sort of removed some of these middlemen or gatekeepers that often had to exist in these old traditional media style systems of stardom. Because of the accessibility of social media, both on the end of the content creators and of the potential audience members, in some ways this idea of the star system has sort of democratized the sort of rise to fame. Heavy emphasis here on in some ways. This is really true primarily in like the early days of YouTube or early days of social media before they had gained this sort of worldwide acceptance as a platform for entertainment. This idea of the democratization of the star system has definitely become more complicated in the last few years. Unfortunately, although this system is still a bit more open than it used to be, the new media star system or the social media star system has sort of evolved to become more exclusionary. Now, these exclusionary practices have actually become more prevalent as old media has sort of invaded new media spaces. An example of how this works is YouTube's algorithms largely determine who gets to see what and where and when. So as a result of this, the discovery pages and the places where people used to be able to find new talent on YouTube have largely been overtaken by those who are really well-established stars on YouTube, but also those like sort of traditional media that have sort of taken up space in these new media realms. Jimmy Fallon's late night talk show, or you know, the television shows that we watch often have YouTube pages that have sort of followings from these traditional media that come with them to these new media slash social media spaces. What tends to happen is, because they get a lot of traffic, those tend to be some of the pages that are most popular and will populate these spaces on YouTube's like watch pages and, you know, discover pages and things like that, where people might be able to pick up like new things that they might be interested in. But because YouTube is a capitalistic enterprise, of course, they tend to advertise those pages or spaces that tend to have a lot of traffic anyway, for promotional purposes and for money-making purposes and whatever. As more of these traditional media entities sort of embed themselves within these new media spaces, on top of sort of the proliferation of creators on these platforms becomes more robust, it becomes more and more difficult for new creators to sort of find an audience in these spaces. And as a result, it means that these algorithms that YouTube has created to push out content to new people, or introduce new creators to YouTube users, it becomes more difficult for newer creators to sort of break into the sort of system that now has been created. Now, there's also the matter of traditional media adopting new media stars that we can consider here. This has been done in various ways and to various degrees of success in the past. Grace Helbig, for example, had a short-lived talk show. I believe it was on E! Hannah Hart had a short-lived show with the Food Network called I Heart Food, I think it was called. PBS has partnered with the Vlogbrothers on several occasions within their various edutainment, so education and entertainment ventures. Lily Singh, for example, has had bit parts in movies and things like that, and has very recently been tapped to take over Carson Daly's late night show. Tyler Oakley is on his second run on CBS's The Amazing Race, and he's also worked on social media segments and things like that with Ellen DeGeneres. Gabby Hanna has sort of broken into the music industry. There are several other sorts of stories that are similar to this, whereby traditional media is sort of adopting people that have become famous or created their own sort of star power within these new media spaces. So this is a pretty complicated subject, a lot more than I could probably put into one video here, really. It's kind of interesting to me how these new media spaces, how they've sort of created their own star systems, but in some ways it's becoming really complicated, largely because of the way in which traditional media has sort of embedded itself within, interacted with, etc., these new media spaces. So I suppose that even though right now fame is, to a degree, in the hands of those who seek it, meaning people can sort of take their fate in their own hands and try and create their own brand on social media and hope that people pick it up and sort of run with it and, you know, follow them and whatever. It would seem that rather than YouTube killing the Hollywood star, Hollywood is, in some ways, disrupting the possibilities of emerging YouTube stars. But I don't know. Like I say, this is really a complicated matter, much more than can take part in a few-minute video. This is a lot more of a complicated issue, I think, than I'm probably giving it credit for. So what are your thoughts on this, strangers? Share your thoughts down below in the comments. And I guess with that, I will just say, until next Monday, my fellow strangers, because I'll see you then. Bye.